Thank you very much. Before I start, I just wanted to sort of take a quick survey of who's here. How many people here in this room are coffee roasters or coffee retailers? You raise your hands. And how many are baristas? How many work in the coffee business in other ways? Okay. Well, I'm going to speak to you today from the perspective of a coffee roaster. And I'm going to talk about one of the things that has contributed to making Intelligentsia successful. Obviously, there are a lot of things that go into making a good business. Many of them apply regardless of whether you're selling coffee or food or electronics or shoes. Things like hiring the right people, making customer service a priority, having good financial and accounting skills, and being clever about marketing. These things are all important for any business. In our case, we failed in most of those for a very long time. We were honestly very terrible at them. But we did one thing really well, and that was enough to take us very far. And that one thing is quality. And I want to provide you with some details about how we define quality, how we refine quality, and give you a short recipe that hopefully will have some resonance in your own business environment. So first, why don't we ask a simple question? Why does quality matter? There's plenty of coffee businesses that have been very successful over the years without quality. And that's been true in the past. I'm sure that'll be true in the future. So why should we care? Why should we pursue quality? And here's the thing, and I'm sure most of you already know this, but quality stands out in any product. It has a way of standing out, making itself very visible. And it endures past the demise of temporary trends or fads. And if you want to sell coffee at higher prices, you need to be able to give customers something that they can't get elsewhere. It's been proven over and over and over again in almost every industry in the world that people will pay more for better quality as long as you can give it to them consistently. Here in Korea, I had the privilege of being invited here in 2010, and even since then, it's very apparent how much of a boom the Korean coffee industry and coffee market is in right now. It's explosive. There's new companies opening every week, it seems. There's a massive expansion. And as more and more coffee businesses enter the market, it's going to become harder and harder for existing ones to differentiate themselves. You can build a beautiful store, you can decorate it with an artful touch, you can tell great stories, but ultimately those are things that are fairly easy to duplicate. Others can do that without a whole lot of effort. Quality, however, is extremely hard to duplicate. It requires tremendous effort and persistent effort. And if you invest your resources in trying to do the best quality you can, others will have a much harder time keeping up with you. Quality also has its own reward. One of the parts of a recipe of a good business is to have great people. You need great employees, great people if you expect to grow and be able to thrive. Quality has the great quality of being able to attract people. People gravitate to quality. Good people gravitate and find their way to you if you're offering something that's of a very high quality. If you build your business or choose to build your business on quality, you can create something that will also give back to you in many ways. And I'm not just talking about dollars. I'm not just talking about profits. There is community in coffee, in the quality sector. There's a sense of purpose that you get from doing something, creating something that has a special value in the world. There's a pleasure you get simply by working with delicious things. And there's really a constant opportunity to contribute to making other people's lives better, whether they be customers who love great taste and are able to find something through you that they wouldn't access otherwise, whether it's farmers who become enabled because of their work with you and the focus on quality and are able to become entrepreneurs, or whether it's whole communities finding new opportunity. A great example of this is Rwanda and what's happened there. Prior to 2001, there was no specialty coffee whatsoever in Rwanda. They didn't produce a single bean of specialty quality coffee. Today, because of the investment of a lot of people in the private sector and the government, and because of the growth of the specialty market in consuming countries, Rwanda is now considered one of the quality leaders in East Africa. They've got tremendous quality there. Farmers are finally realizing a true benefit and a profit from coffee, which was simply not possible 10 years ago and would not be possible today if it were not for quality. You can also save some money in your marketing budget because quality has the characteristic that it's able to speak for itself. Quality does some of your advertising for you by itself. It has its own voice. Beyond that, coffee quality and coffees that taste delicious deliver a little bit of daily happiness, which is something that could never be undervalued. Now, let me tell you a short story. Now, this is a short story of Intelligentsia's beginning. We started in 1995, and we really didn't know much at all about coffee. We didn't know what cupping was. We didn't know what a sample roaster was. We didn't know how to roast or sample roast coffees. We'd never been to a producing country. We really didn't know anything about roast chemistry. We purchased green coffee mostly based on other people's recommendations. And when we did start receiving roasted samples, we would brew them in these things. I used to have a whole line, an army of these things lined up on my desk. And I'd get samples and put some in each and brew it and taste it. And that's how we made all of our purchasing and quality decisions. So, we didn't know a whole lot. But what we did do, and the thing that set us apart from other companies at the time, is that we tried harder. We made the most of what we had. We got very obsessive about details. I would throw away coffee in the garbage when it wasn't tasting good to me. It wasn't a good economic decision maybe, but it was a good quality decision. We trusted our senses, even though at that time they were still somewhat untrained and unrefined. We invested a lot in learning. We became students of coffee. And we tried to have fun. Business should be fun, I think. A funny memory is some of my first favorite coffees were things like Sumatra, Yemen, Harar coffee from Ethiopia, none of which, ironically, we buy today. We don't buy those because these days I don't like them. But we gravitated towards those coffees because they were overt and expressive. They stood out. When you're a kid, a young child or a teenager, I think you like punk rock music, or you like things that are very rebellious and expressive. You like things that are loud. And as you grow up and you mature and you experience more, you learn to appreciate nuance and delicacy, elegance, clarity, some of those things, whether it's your art or your music or your coffee. And you develop a sense of what you find most attractive and pleasurable in a coffee. And then you start to appreciate the importance of small details. At that point, once you've decided what you like, you begin a relentless pursuit of it, and you obsess about trying to make it as perfect as you possibly can. And that is the moment when, as a coffee roaster, as an artist, as an entrepreneur, you begin to stand out and differentiate yourself from your competition. Some of the things that we did in those early days, we embraced the local culinary scene because we found commonality between what we were trying to do and what a lot of local chefs at the time were doing in obsessing about quality. We participated in auctions like the Cup of Excellence, which taught us quite a lot about coffee and connected us with a lot of great coffee producers. We engaged with the Roasters Guild of America, the Baristas Guild, the Specialty Coffee Associations. We participated in competitions and barista competitions. We engaged with the research community. Essentially, we tried to reach out to everyone we could in coffee and be an active participant, be engaged. And I'll ask you, what do all of those things have in common? Well, all of those organizations I just mentioned have in common. They're all in pursuit. They exist simply for the pursuit of better understanding of coffee quality. And they all have a sense of community. These are important things in specialty coffee, and I think they're, in my opinion, very critical to success. Our reputation as a coffee company has always been tied to quality, and that's what's given us the opportunity to grow. Today we're working with farmers in 20 countries very directly. We're selling coffee all over the United States, and we're succeeding in ways that we really never dreamed possible. We're connecting people. We're enhancing people's lives in very meaningful and tangible ways. And we owe all of this to quality and have every reason to be grateful. So I gave you a short story. Hope I didn't bore you. I'm now going to give you this recipe that I promised. This is one recipe. This is our recipe. It's not the only one. There's plenty of others out there in the world. But this is what works for us. And I think you need to start by defining what it is you're trying to do. The first thing you really need as a specialty coffee business is a very clear target of some kind. If you don't know exactly what you're looking for, you really can't know when you've found it. So step one might be to define what it is you like. And this takes time. The best way to accomplish that in coffee is to expose yourself to as much coffee as you can, to taste all of the coffees available in your markets, to go to public cuppings, go to shows like this and taste things, talk to other people about coffee, take classes in tasting coffee. And really, once you've exposed yourself a lot to different kinds of coffees, you learn to develop a taste for certain things, and you begin to really learn what you like in coffee. This is the way I think about quality these days. It's not only what's there, it's also, in many ways, what's not there that defines quality for us. When you think about what's there, things like sweetness. Without sweetness, all is lost. You simply cannot have great quality coffee if the sweetness is not there, because it's one of the very essential components of quality. And sweetness is something that also happens to be very universally beloved. When you come out of the womb as a little infant and somebody puts something sweet in your mouth, you smile. It's something that we have been born to appreciate and to like. And coffee should be sweet. If coffee's not sweet, it's probably not, at least in my opinion, very high in quality. Fruit acids. Ripe fruits are some of the most delicious things that we eat in this world. Biting into a ripe mango or tangerine gives you an intense level of pleasure. And these same fruit tastes can be found in the best quality coffees. Complexity and clarity, I'll talk a little more about that later. But absence of negative traits. This is also a major part of the quality formula. Most coffee drinkers are used to coffees having a lot of bitterness. They put milk and sugar in there by habit. This is because most coffees are bitter, and you need to put sugar in to make them taste okay. When we look for coffees, part of our definition of quality, part of the litmus that we use and the criteria we use in evaluation is an absence or a very low threshold of some of these tastes, which are, to us, definitively negative and unpleasant. And once you've learned to define the things you like, the next step really is to start to train yourself to identify with some degree of precision and consistency these things. Sensory evaluation is a very delicate thing. It's perhaps one of the most underrated skills in all of coffee. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute too. But first, I'd like to just talk about some of these common fruit acids. I think a lot of consumers are unaware that coffee contains many of the exact same acids that contribute flavors in fruits. So if you like limes and you like oranges, you like grapefruits, the citric acid that is in those fruits is also in most coffees. It's one of the most dominant acids in coffee. Malic acid, which you find in pears, nectarines, apples, it's a beautiful acid, delicious acid, and it's in coffee as well, in quality coffees. And tartaric acid, which you find in grapes and berries, plums, one of the major acids in wine. This is an acid that you find in coffee as well. I mentioned I'd say more about complexity. To us, complexity is when you have not just one or two, but a convergence of many different fruit acids in a single coffee that creates this sense of depth and a profound complexity of taste. And it can be delicious. These acids are good by themselves. In combination, they become even better. We've also got other acids. You know, Kenyan coffees. Do people here like Kenyan coffees? Yeah or no? Yeah, some people do. I love them myself. And one of the things that stands out or helps to define the character of Kenyan coffees is phosphoric acid. It's an acid that you don't find much in coffees from Latin America, but you find very in high frequency in coffees from Kenya. Other things, florals. Who here likes Ethiopian coffees? Yeah, me too. Love them. One of the things that stands out about Ethiopian coffees is they have these floral traits that remind you of jasmine or coffee blossom perfume. It's really, really beautiful. And you don't find those much in other coffee countries. So we value that quite a lot. Now, I'd like to elaborate just for a minute on sensory. I said it was hard. It's a skill, just like anything else, just like playing the guitar. If you want to learn to become a great guitarist, what do you have to do? You have to practice a lot, over and over and over again. You want to be great? You have to do it every day, or nearly every day. It's the kind of thing that you only get better at with time and putting the work in. Now, coffee is known to have hundreds of different compounds that contribute to taste and to aroma. It's indisputably the most complex beverage known to man, far more complex than wine or beer or anything else that we consider to be a fine quality beverage. So that's kind of daunting if you think about it. You need to learn to taste coffees. You need to figure out what all these things are. But then you think about the instrument that we use to measure it. This thing, this crazy thing here, the brain, is even more complicated, unfathomably complicated mechanism. You know, QC, quality control, employees have it really easy in electronics. They can test for signals. They see if the light goes on, it's working. If it goes off, it's not working. Cuppers can't do that. They need to interpret a mountain of data in a very short amount of time, sometimes a handful of seconds, and realize that their decisions will have this cascading effect, this cascading impact on other people's lives, on farmers or on consumers who are purchasing these coffees. The first step in becoming a great coffee cupper is to have a profound recognition that we are all flawed instruments. I think the worst mistake you can make as a coffee cupper is overconfidence, because overconfidence leads to subconscious bias. It leads you to not devote the proper amount of concentration to what you're doing when you're cupping. We're all very reflexive animals by nature, which is usually good. The more we do something, the more we develop these reflexes. But it's not always good, because reflex can easily become habit and lead to some cognitive laziness, which is the enemy of good sensory evaluation. What's amazing to me is that after nearly 20 years of cupping coffee on an almost daily basis, it still never becomes automatic. It's something that you need to bring a very disciplined mental state and approach to every single time you do it. Some things like driving, driving requires a number of different skills, but it can be done sometimes on a semi-autopilot mode where you just, you're thinking about your girlfriend or or the concert you're going to later, and you're not really concentrating on driving, but somehow you still get to where you're going. Cupping's not like that. If your mind isn't clear, if you're distracted, you're thinking about other things, your ability to accurately decipher exactly what's going on in the coffee is very, very diminished. So, I'd also make this analogy. If you've ever been reading a book and you start to get tired and you read 3 paragraphs and then you realize that you've read these paragraphs, but you don't remember a single thing that you just read. It's because your mind is distracted. Cupping is very much like that. It's very sensory, it's very delicate, and if you're not paying very strict attention at every moment to what's going on, you'll miss quite a lot. If you remember one thing from this presentation, remember this. If you want to be a good taster, you have to bring discipline. It's not a casual effort. Respecting that it's a very difficult skill will make you better. So, this is sort of step 3 in this recipe that I'm giving you. You need to develop some kind of a protocol for evaluating coffee. There's a lot of existing forums out there. There's a Specialty Coffee Association of America forum. There's a Cup of Excellence forum. These are good forums. They're valuable because they help the industry develop a common language for talking about coffee quality. But they're not always ideal for daily quality control. They're not always ideal for the specific purpose that you might have as a roaster or a barista or a retailer. And once you've got a defined vision of what you're looking for, what you're trying to achieve, you can develop a form or modify an existing form so that it perfectly suits your specific intention and purpose. One of the things we did was to begin thinking about each coffee as a collection of individual sensory traits that can be considered either positive or negative. We designed our form then to help us focus very specifically and narrowly on those things, focus our tasting efforts on the very things that matter the most to us, that we want our coffees to have, and that most readily translate into the consumer experience, consumer's drinking experience. Sometimes I think in the industry we get a little caught up in a sort of an Olympics kind of mentality where things are scored based on a whole host of very technical traits that may not really be relevant to the people watching for pleasure. Coffee can be like that. We have to always remember at the end of the day what we're trying to do is create a beverage that will give somebody pleasure and that they'll respond to and be able to embrace. With this form, every single score the final score is a calculation that accounts for all the things that make it pleasurable, minus all the things that detract from that pleasure. And from what I've seen, the average score that we produce on these, using this form, this approach, is very good at predicting how other people will react to the coffee, whether it's a barista or a coffee consumer. One of the goals of cupping is to create sort of a blueprint of a coffee, to capture its essential character on paper so that you can talk about it, so that you can communicate about it. And this is critical for understanding it. If we don't understand it, it's impossible to control it. Impossible. And really understanding what a coffee is doing and why you like or dislike what it's doing is the first step towards delivering greatness to your customers and to providing useful, applicable, meaningful feedback to coffee farmers. Now, this is something we repeat to ourselves every day, is data, 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 data. We want more data, we need more data. The more data you generate, the better you can evaluate what's happening with your coffees. I recommend tasting your coffees every day, cupping every day with some purpose, and not just doing it casually or fleetingly, but taking the time to record as much as you can about the experience. I always advocate measuring everything you can. It was like putting coffee through a medical exam. You can measure its moisture, its bulk density, its screen size, its color, its water activity. You put it under a UV light and see how it responds. And it's very hard to repeat your successes if you're not methodical in your approach to creating coffee. And the other important thing is to track coffee's performance over time, because coffee is not a simple thing. It's not something that can be captured in a photograph or a snapshot. It's an organic, complicated, complex organic product. And over time, through roasting and extraction, you'll find that you can discover a lot of different behaviors or traits in the coffee that you might not have seen on the first time you tasted it. So understanding how it performs over a long period of time through various roasts, various extractions, will give you a better sense of really what that coffee is all about. It'll help you understand it, and it'll help you anticipate changes. Moisture content, I won't spend much time talking about it because I don't want to eat up all the time for questions. But moisture is very critical in coffee. It's one of the most critical things for coffee shelf life and stability. If you don't have a moisture meter, you should. And I always recommend, sometimes the industry standard is considered to be between 10 and 12% overall humidity. I think personally that 12% is much too high. It's pushing on the upper edge of where coffee starts to become unstable. It generally has bad implications for quality, durability over time. So I really would recommend to you to try to get coffees and work with coffees that are more in the 10.5 to 11% moisture range. This is an example that I brought for you of one of our quality control reports. We taste these coffees every single day. We have a panel of people who taste together. This is another thing about quality. You don't want to do it in a vacuum. You don't want to trust one single tongue to always make the right decisions. Having a sensory panel that is calibrated with one another and can taste coffees together means that you'll avoid falling into the trap of having blind spots or allowing bias to creep into your cupping. When you have several people, you might have some arguments from time to time. Somebody might like the coffee more or less. You can debate the merits of the coffee, and eventually you arrive at a more accurate evaluation when you have multiple people working together to analyze it. You can see here we divide things into positive and negative. All of these different traits have different values to us, based both on what they are and the intensity with which they occur in a particular coffee. Dryness we separate it from astringency. Astringency is a very negative trait. Dryness is a slightly negative trait. Anyway, I don't want to take up all the time with this. Let me show you this. This is a production roast report. This is when I'm talking about tracking things over time. This is what I'm talking about. This is one particular coffee, Galena Avaya from Yirgacheffe. And you can see that when we bought it, it was performing around here at a 91 generally. When we tasted the pre-shipment samples, they were here. We sampled from many different bags, and we found a range of different quality, meaning that there were some inconsistencies probably in the preparation. Then when we began roasting it commercially for production and selling it, acted every single day, every single roast. And you can see each one of these little blobs here is a particular roast of that coffee. And most of them fall within this range from 90 to 94. That's a good performance. If the coffee is staying in within a 4-point range and it's a very high range, I would consider that good. But when we have an outlier like this, then it gives us the opportunity to ask ourselves, why? What happened? What did we do wrong? When we have something up here, we can ask the opposite question. What did we do right? And little by little, you learn to repeat these successes and you avoid the mistakes. Even a very careful, experienced roaster will swing a coffee up and down by 4 points. In our experience, if they're not using some kind of tools to monitor what they're doing and enhance their ability to be precise. Roast chemistry is very complicated. Maybe next year they'll invite me back and I'll do a whole seminar on the chemistry of roasting, because it's fascinating and it's daunting. It makes you really appreciate how much skill goes into roasting coffee. But these are very simple things that you can use, the technology that you can access for relatively low cost to track all of your roasts by a function of time and temperature. These are all individual roasts. This is a rate of rise curve, so this is tracking how quickly the beans are absorbing energy and increasing in temperature. And each of these there's kind of 3 different patterns here. Each of these produce a different result. We cup those, we compare them, we measure them, and we find that we prefer when the rate of rise is like this. So it gives us the ability to more accurately roast the coffees to get the result that we want. So, you know what you want. What do you want? Quality. You want quality. You kind of know, I guess, at this point, how to identify it. You've trained yourself to be a good sensory evaluator. You've trained yourself how to taste coffee and identify the things you like. So then what? What's the next step in all of this? We're reaching a point in the industry, in the global industry, where barista skills are becoming fairly commonplace. It's very easy to access good training. There's a lot of great baristas out there in the world. And this is great because you need that to succeed. It's a very important skill. But here's the thing. The better you get at extracting coffee, at manipulating it, bringing clarity to brews, whether they're drip, filter brews, or espressos, the more time you spend tasting coffee and educating your customers to taste coffee, the more important the ingredients become. This is not unique to coffee. I think most chefs will say that the most important thing they can do is to get their hands on good ingredients to start with, and their job becomes far more easy. Once the focus when good brewing and good roasting and a slightly more sophisticated consumer base is in place, the light is brighter, the expectations are higher, and just like great restaurants, the best ones succeed because they have great vision, great technique, but also great ingredients. Ever seen the movie Jiro Dreams of Sushi? Ever seen that? It's highly applicable. Jiro knows very well the importance, the critical importance of quality ingredients. If you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's kind of inspirational and applies very, very well to what we do as coffee professionals. Now, I'll tell you a little secret about coffee. Maybe it's not a secret. Maybe it's something we all know already. Most of it tastes terrible, awful, horrible. A small percentage of it is maybe mediocre or acceptable. And then a very tiny sliver is great. It's truly great. There are a lot of reasons for that. Most of them are economic reasons. Farmers are simply not paid to be craftspeople. They're paid to harvest commodities. Most of them, as my new friend explained before me, lack access to a lot of important resources, financing, technical expertise that is needed to better control the outcome of a quality production system. And, the fact is there's just not a lot of great coffee out there. If all of you are looking to compete in coffee, you're all fighting over a very tiny amount of truly great coffee that's being produced today in the world. But there's another big secret. What's that? That is, most farmers would love to produce better quality. I know a lot of farmers all over the world, and I don't know a single one who is not interested in producing better quality. But they need a reason to do that. And what's the reason? It's economic incentive. They also need sometimes a little guidance. They might need access to resources that they don't have direct access to now. That's something where, it might seem so distant as a coffee roaster in Seoul, Korea, from a small coffee farmer in Colombia. But that distance is bridged these days with the access we have to different methods of communication. And really, you can interact and work in close partnership with farmers. And if your goal is great quality, you should. I think there's we talk a lot about this thing called direct trade. It's a name that we've given to the work that we do, the approach we take to buying coffee. But more than anything else, it's about seeking out farmers who have the capacity, the environmental preconditions maybe, to produce great quality, and then forming partnerships where you agree to work together for a long time, you make commitments to each other, you support each other, and all of this is built on this fundamental understanding that by working together you can achieve a lot more, and you can achieve your individual goals much better than you can when you're positioned in opposition to each other or working without direct communication. Things you can start to do once you have this relationship with farms is look together at the production systems, look at how the process control is being managed, look at how you can improve quality through applying new techniques. Sometimes it's just a matter of having a little more resource available to pay for better harvesting, to apply a better nutrition program for the coffee trees. And those are things that if you're working together and you have real commitment to each other and agreements, you can solve together. Transparency is something I talk a lot about. It's critical in this because there are, if you're going to commit resources to a farmer in Honduras or to a farmer in Colombia, and they're going to commit, to working with you, you need to have a certain level of trust between you. You need to trust each other enough to say, look, I feel very confident this person's going to do what they say they're going to do. Trust is something that can only be earned, of course. It's earned over time. It's not something that can be purchased, but it's absolutely critical in a successful direct trade relationship between a roaster and a farmer, and transparency must be there in order to even have the shot at developing trust. If there's not transparency, and by this I mean an understanding of where the money's going, how it's being distributed. A lot of times coffee is sold at the port by an exporter. If you're a roaster buying that, you could pay $20 a pound for it, but it still only $1 may still be going back to the actual farm. So you need to know exactly how much money is being taken at various points in the supply chain, and most importantly, know what is going into the pocket of the farmer in cash. Now, this is kind of interesting. We recently did some trials, aging trials. There's conventional wisdom in coffee, in the world of coffee, that after about 2 or 3 weeks, the roasted coffee starts to get very stale and loses all of its quality. But interestingly, what we found in the most recent trials was that we tasted a 6-month-old coffee, roasted 6 months ago, that tasted better than one that was roasted 3 days ago. The only real explanation for this is the quality of the green coffee, the ingredient. The coffees that we had used at that time 6 months ago were of a higher quality than the ones that we had in our possession at this moment. And even though one was much, much, much older, it still tasted better. Now this, I'm not ready to draw heavy conclusions from this. It's an anecdotal experiment, but all indications are that the freshness of the green coffee itself is the most important thing, and far more important than whether the roast is 1 week old, 2 weeks old, or 5 weeks old. Now, this is a small calendar I put together, and what it's showing you here is the harvest period in all of these different countries. You can see all of these countries are located in East Africa and Central America, and they harvest coffee in our winter months, in January, February, mostly. Then all these coffees down here are coffees from countries that produce coffee in the southern hemisphere, and they generally have production cycles that have a harvest time, central harvest or peak harvest in the latter half of the year, in September, October. So if you're a roaster and what you're looking for is to have fresh coffee all the time, you can plan your purchasing program around buying coffees from this area of the world, from the northern hemisphere, in these months and using it throughout the summer, and then starting to switch some of your lineup and rely more heavily on southern hemisphere coffees for the end of the year and into the spring until the fresh crop centrals are available again. I always tell people, if you're buying and drinking a Costa Rican coffee in January, it's at least a year old, it's last year's crop, and invariably it's not going to be as good as a fresh crop coffee from a different country. Green coffee freshness is absolutely critical. Like I said earlier, it's the ingredients that really make the difference between a good quality coffee and a great one. It's not the roasting, although that's very critical too, and it's not the extraction, although that's also critical. It's what you start with that defines the real potential of the coffee quality, and everything else you do to it, roasting it, extracting it, is in service of that potential, which is defined by the quality of the green coffee itself. Now, this is an old graph. I just threw it up here because I was placed in the marketing and pricing section of today's event, so I thought I'd reference it. What you see here are a couple lines. This is the New York futures market between '89 and 2008. This is the period of the coffee crisis here. This is the line of the fair trade minimum price, which is the price support mechanism. It's changed since then. It's a little bit, floats a little bit higher above the sea now. But I put this up here just to prompt you to ask yourselves a few questions. What is fair? What does that mean to you? What is appropriate when it comes to pricing coffee? And how do we define these things? I would say you can start in one very basic place. You can start with real production costs, because if there's any truth in coffee, it's that if the price or the value of the coffee at its point of sale from the farm is lower than the cost it took to produce it, it's not sustainable. And those production costs can be very variable from farm to farm, region to region, country to country. So it's not sufficient just to take a universal figure and assume that that's going to be accurate in a specific production context. This is where the relationship comes in, and the transparency. When you work with other farmers, you can have these very open conversations about what production cost is, what a farm needs in order to make a profit. Then you can add for development costs. If you want coffee to be better, if you expect it to be better, it means you have to invest. The farmer has to be spending money to improve infrastructure, to plant better varieties, to increase the management and the nutrition programs, to take soil samples. That costs money, and that needs to be accounted for if you're working together and you're trying to build a better coffee. And then once you get into things like harvesting and processing, if for every incremental increase that you want to obtain in quality, there's an associated production cost, whether that's more labor during the harvest season, whether that's picking less coffee every day, whether that's drying coffee over a longer period of time, whether it's storing it in grain pro sacks and underground cellars. All of these things add cost to the coffee and need to be accounted for if you want to have a sustainable production system. I put this line in here. This is it's not entirely arbitrary, but shouldn't take too much from it. But this is my personal belief that when you're talking about good quality coffee, anything below this red line, below $2, is probably unsustainable to me. If this is all we can pay as an industry to farmers over the next 10 years, quality coffee is going to slowly disappear. I think this is the bare minimum that it takes to produce a legitimate 88, 87-point coffee in the cup consistently. You can have happy accidents sometimes, but to do it consistently takes time, takes money. And as quality increases and across various different production systems, the costs can continue to go up. I think there's coffees out there that are well worth $5, $6, $7 a pound of green coffee. I think this is a very good range to live in. Most of the space in here allows for both a roaster and a farmer to be profitable. Now, if you do all of these things that I mentioned, you become a student of quality and an ambassador for quality, you really will contribute to making a better coffee world. Coffee was once considered, a long time ago, more valuable than gold. It was a drink for kings. When it spread around the world, it slowly lost value. It became a commodity that today really returns very little of value to the millions of farmers around the world that depend on coffee for a living. And along the way, it didn't just lose value, it lost quality. And most people today consider it a very cheap, bitter beverage that requires a lot of milk and sugar to taste good, and that should be given away for free or maybe for a very small contribution. Young people today, they prefer to drink cans of chemicals, like Red Bull or something like this, and energy drinks. They prefer to get their caffeine from other sources. But coffee has the upper hand. And a great coffee does so many things that no artificial energy drink can ever accomplish. It's full of very healthy compounds, polyphenols and flavonoids and antioxidants. It has aromas and flavors that delight our senses. And it can support the livelihoods of millions of families. It can create community, and it can inspire people. Quality coffee is really something that has a lot of power if we're willing as an industry and as a culture to embrace it and support it. And quality coffee as a business owner can give you an upper hand. And it's one of the few things that can really allow small roasters to compete with larger companies who will always have more resources, can spend more on marketing, and can always produce coffee at lower costs. So I hope you found some of the things that I said today at least interesting, maybe useful, hopefully applicable. And with that, I want to say Kamsahamnida.